Which American cultural norms or behaviors are hardest for you to comprehend? Story 1. Americans have a fondness for French fries, cheese, and gravy, yet surprisingly, poutine hasn't gained popularity in the United States as one might expect. This discrepancy has always struck me as peculiar. Story 2. School sports symbols are a unique phenomenon. In my area, we simply have teams that compete. However, in the United States, there's a fervent rally cry like, "Go Easttown Eagles! Ooga Chaka!" accompanied by someone dressed in an economical eagle costume doing tricks like spinning a basketball on their finger. Before a game, they might have an elaborate cheerleading performance, whereas we just exchange handshakes and gaze intently at our opponents. Story 3. Receiving only 2 weeks of vacation, or none at all, is common for many. In the country where I currently reside, taking 2 consecutive weeks of compulsory vacation is obligatory. Factoring in public holidays, I enjoy roughly 7 weeks of holiday time annually. Note: this post received more attention than anticipated. Perusing through the responses, there's a noticeable disparity between individuals with minimal or no paid time off, PTO, and those with substantial vacation benefits. These privileges stem from the benevolence of employers rather than any government-enforced holiday policy. Story 4. As someone from Latin America, I want to clarify my perspective. The concept of cultural appropriation puzzles me, especially when it involves others embracing or expressing interest in Latin culture. After discussing with many from my cultural background, the consensus is that we see no issue with it. P.S. If you hold a different view, I'm open to a conversation. I'm not upset. I merely wish to comprehend the reasoning behind such opinions. Story 5. Unbreakable two-party system. People are very dissatisfied with both. Yet Greens and Libertarians are the only third parties I can name, and they're still irrelevant. I've heard political scientists from my country where it's more diverse saying U.S. two-party system is a good thing, but I'm still not convinced. I do see it as a part of political culture. Sorry if not what you meant. Story 6. The United States is a massive, massive country, both in terms of its size and in terms of population. It's also a country that's comprised of several distinct geographical and cultural regions, so it would be difficult to pin down cultural norms and behaviors that are common to people all across the entire country. People in Maine are quite different from people in Southern California. People in Georgia are quite different from people in Washington State. The northern Midwest is a strikingly different place from the deep South. Generally speaking, Americans tend to be more open and friendly than people in many other countries, especially in terms of how forward they are. It's not at all uncommon for a total and complete stranger to start making conversation right out of the blue, which would be quite strange in places like Northern Europe or East Asia. Americans, for the most part, seem to have largely maintained that English puritanical obsession with rules and regulations. They tend to take things like lining up, putting shopping carts back after using them, throwing trash away properly, very seriously, and they are not shy about calling people out for being inconsiderate. Americans tend to see the line between informality and formality as being very rigid. If they're not doing anything special, they tend to dress in what people in many other cultures would consider to be an almost cartoonish manner, with lots of sweatpants, t-shirts, blue jeans, baseball caps, and sneakers being seen pretty much everywhere on a constant basis, and they tend to see getting dressed up as being only for special occasions. They tend to be very open about their own personal lives and willing to discuss all sorts of things that people in other cultures would likely consider to be private matters, but they are loath to go into detail about their personal political views, though I have noticed a major shift in the opposite direction over the course of the last 20 years or so. Smiling, pleasantries, and small talk are pretty much par for the course in many parts of the U.S., though it is not as common in big cities as it is elsewhere. I think one of the most defining aspects of the American character is how positive they can be. There really is a widespread belief that things are going to be okay, that they'll get better, that anything is possible, and for all of the economic disparity and the racial strife, I think it's still part of the national psyche to a big extent. I think the most difficult thing to get past is that unshakable tunnel vision. It's like they've collectively agreed to ignore that the rest of the world exists sometimes, or at the very least, they've agreed among themselves to consider it to be far less important than their own country. I think Americans get a bad rap, and they're nowhere near as stupid as many people around the world paint them to be. I mean, let's face it, they are citizens of the wealthiest, most powerful, most influential country in the world. So if they're all buffoons, what does that say about us, right? But there is a willful ignorance on their part in the sense that they tend to see themselves as the center of the universe, and they judge other people and other countries by how interconnected and how close they are with their own. In terms of being a visitor to the US, it's an absolutely incredible experience. If you've only heard negative things about them and you're expecting to be among stupid cows grazing the entire time, you'll be pleasantly surprised by how interested in you they'll be and how nice and pleasant and hospitable and accommodating they are. In all honesty, they are often treated rather poorly when they go abroad because their reputation precedes them, but they don't pay it back when we go there, and that's the truth. The USA is certainly not my favorite country in the world, but by and large, Americans themselves are wonderful, wonderful people. I wouldn't want to live there, but I sure wouldn't mind living with or around the people themselves, if that makes any sense. Story 7. MAGA. It is a source of bewilderment, amusement, and fear for your future. In my 4 decades, I cannot recall U.S. politics being anywhere near as crazy and toxic as it is right now. I can see why people dislike Biden, but I cannot for the life of me understand what anybody sees in Trump. He is a sleazy, lying grifter who fucks over everyone around him. I just don't get it. Story 8. I'm an American, but I have a hard time with American friendliness. When I go to a restaurant, waiters always seem to want to make chit-chat with me. I just want to order food, not strike up a conversation with someone I don't even know. I know that waiters are doing this to get better tips, but as an introvert, this is hard for me to comprehend. I don't associate chit-chat and small talk with good service. Story 9. Going to work sick, going out in public sick, going to social events sick. Americans are proud of being up and at 'em when they're sick and contagious, and they've always been that way. Of course, there's also the top-down oppression of employers who force you to work sick, or they'll fire you. These are the same bosses who are too stupid to realize that the long-term effect on the company is worse if one contagious person comes in and then gets the whole workforce sick. Geniuses, really. Story 10. They have normalized having no labor rights. When I was in America, 50, even 60 HRS a week were the rule. I work 42 in my country and I wish it was less. Also, the at-will contracts. You have 0 rights. They can fire you any moment they want with 0 consequences like WTF. And on top of that, a lot of people are convinced unions are bad. Unbelievable. Story 11. Brides being the absolute center of attention who can't be overshadowed by anyone or anything. In my country, no one would care if someone proposed to her partner in their wedding or announce a pregnancy to the family. Weddings here are considered family events where things like this are expected to happen. Story 12. America has such a blend of cultures and ideologies. I found there really isn't a hard definition of culture, especially to my experience growing up with Asian family ties. There's something for everybody. Depends where you live, what you do, and what your social circles are, of course. But in my experience, America is more relaxed in the sense that you, generally, have the freedom to practice life the way you want. You can essentially pick your culture. I personally find that liberating and much less oppressive than the Asian practices that I grew up with. Story 13. The huge serving sizes. I don't want to always bring back the leftovers, but if I don't, I feel like I'm wasting food for no reason. And the very aggressive panhandlers. They get in your face, get mad if you offer them something else, demand that you pay for their food. All that aggressive behavior is odd, considering that most people offer help out of the kindness of their hearts. I've heard stories of how they're starving, but will throw a fit when offered a simple sandwich that they did not want and demand something more expensive to their liking. Story 14. The amount of times I've had an American tell me they don't have an accent is mind-blowing. They think their accent is default, despite America itself having multiple accents. They can't seem to get their head around it being an American accent in the same way there's an Australian one or a Scottish one. This applies to many things, this defaultism, but the accents one always makes me laugh. Story 15. The American commitment to work is something that often leaves me scratching my head. The idea of limited vacation days, the glorification of overworking, and the subtle competition of who's the most stressed out in the office is perplexing. It's as if relaxation is the antithesis of ambition. I'm over here trying to understand why live to work trumps work to live. Story 16. The destructiveness and unhappiness of it all. There's no purpose for it, and I'm tired of the expectation that I work for something that, in the end, benefits nobody. Sure, we have great technology, but people are more miserable than ever and more unbearable to be around than ever. The unquestioned notion that we must grow, build, work, progress, move fast, and break things is utterly pointless without the consideration of how it is done. Most people in this country kill themselves doing jobs that do nothing to make anything better. It's rather insane. I would frankly rather live in the woods and work sparsely for my own and my family than continue on living in a rat race where the end goals only produce new and exciting forms of misery. Story 17. Car culture. Born and lived here all my life, and while I understand how it happened, I cannot understand the U.S.'s love affair with cars. We've ruined our downtowns with highways that cut off parts of the city and parking lots instead of housing or shopping or literally anything else but more space for cars. Transit is severely lacking. There are only a handful of cities in America that are genuinely walkable. If you're a kid or an older person who doesn't drive, you're going to be isolated. If you have a job or need groceries and your car breaks down, you're fucked. We're completely dependent on cheap gas to the point where any disruption of that causes social angst and potential political havoc. There are so many cities I've visited in Europe and Asia that are a pleasure to walk through, where transit is a much more enjoyable experience than fighting other drivers on the roads. But we're never going to stop subsidizing a car-focused lifestyle. That's just how it is here. Story 18. Tipping. Like, what the hell, you have a job and get paid for it? Does engineers and doctors and car mechanics also get tipped? Not including tax on the price tag. By all means, also deduct your own profit from the tag to get even more lying price tags. Flexing about doing 1,000,000-hour work weeks, doing 83 jobs. You're either doing it wrong, doing too much, or doing the wrong thing. All not good reasons to flex. Having Social Security, healthcare, and paying taxes is commu/socialism. Well, if that's the word for it, you need it. Badly. Donald Trump and Joe Biden. That's the best you really got? I'm kind of worried. Story 19. I think most of what foreigners find perplexing or even plain dislike about America and Americans is its almost complete inability to change. It is as if they were the most modern country in the world back in 1770s and simply said, "We're done, we won't move on, ever." And that was that. Even when there are glaring issues, it's better to sweep them under the rug than solve them. This method worked till the internet, as people abroad realized that there were very serious problems that simply weren't being dealt with, and America's reputation collapsed. Story 20. That quite a huge chunk of them think that toilet paper, washing your ass. Note, it's fine if you only wipe, because you are either happy with that level of hygiene or otherwise are unable to wash because of circumstances. I can understand that, even though I am not a fan. However, if you think that it is fundamentally better to just wipe your ass with toilet paper than to properly wash it whenever you shit at home, then I cannot for the life of me wrap my head around you. Story 21. So many things blew my mind when I first moved to the US. It was legit overwhelming. But the thing I find harder to comprehend and adjust is the work ethic. The first compliment Americans will direct at someone is hardworking, and Americans work way too much. I remember my in-laws telling me that working more hours would solve my marriage problems. Wife was cheating. And I was already working 54 hours a week in 2 jobs. I ended up working 72 hours a week for 30 days straight, not a single off day. Lost 10 kg in the process. Story 22. One of the American cultural norms that can be difficult to understand for those who did not grow up in this culture is individualism. It is a focus on independence, personal freedom, and self-expression that is reflected in many aspects of life, from parenting to workplace organization. For people from other cultures, where there may be a greater emphasis on collectivism and community, individualistic values may look unusual. Story 23. The culture around guns, weapons in general. When I heard that if you don't own a gun, you aren't patriotic enough, made me so confused. How is a weapon related to your love for your country? Or is this just something specific to the dramatic nutcases of the country? The culture of bigger is better, not always. America is known for flaunting and shown manship, which makes anything look like a gaint show-off, from things to pride, money, etc. My question is, how do you expect to respect a place that is known for flaunting basically everything? What do any Americans actually think off this? Do they think this is normal, or do they find it annoying, or do people not realize the effect it tends to have? Story 24. How proud they are of their ignorance. I have an American colleague. She has lived here nearly 5 years and still doesn't know. The Romans occupied Britain for hundreds of years. We live in a Roman city that's very proud of its Roman heritage. There are Jews in the UK, She thought we only exist in the USA and Israel. Wales is not part of England, and Portsmouth is an island. You have to drive over bridges to get into Portsmouth, which she has done. Knows literally nothing about our local area. If you move to a new area, I would imagine you would want to look up what there is around. But she wasn't aware there's a free museum like 50 meters from our workplace.